Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Mary Jacobs, and I'm the Associate Dean of the School of Business and Technology here at St. Mary's and MBA Program Director. And I am excited to welcome you to our final in our six-part series that we started in the fall. And today's topic is on exploring entrepreneurship, and I will actually be the facilitator of it. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Matt.
Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be with you all today. I'm Matt Bluem, the Director of the Human Resource Management and Organizational Leadership Programs here at St. Mary's University of Minnesota. And I'm very excited to speak with Mary Jacobs today about entrepreneurship. And Mary, this is such a timely topic with government and corporate layoffs we're reading about. What do you think triggers people to think about starting a business?
Well, Matt, great question. I'm going to back up for a minute and just give a little bit of context too from my perspective. I have been teaching entrepreneurship for about 18 years and have really enjoyed the idea of a webinar, an opportunity for us to be together and to ask questions. So I'll just talk to briefly about our format, and then I'm going to talk to answer your first question. So we're going to exchange prepared Q&A, and we will send out our PowerPoint deck, but I decided for today, because we've got three handouts for you that we're going to put in the chat, that we're just going to have a conversation and go over about what it takes to start a business, as we talked about kind of the myths and the realities of exploring entrepreneurship. And we're excited to be with you today. So now I'm going to segue, Matt, into your question. And as we've all been really experiencing in 2025, there's just a lot going on with government layoffs and with corporate layoffs that are happening more and more regularly. And oftentimes, in my experience, is some kind of an event is what triggers more and more people to consider exploring entrepreneurship. And so I think in this moment right now where people, if they have been laid off or they're concerned about their jobs, are starting to think about, is this maybe the time that I should consider starting a business? And I would also encourage people to think about the timing of it, right? So is this something that you should be starting kind of as a side hustle, a side business? Or if someone is potentially laid off and decides, I'm going to go for it, I'm really going to start my own business, but I want to understand the fundamentals. And our goal today is to give you some ideas about the fundamentals, things for you to think about, things to help you be better prepared financially and emotionally for what it takes to start a business. I'm going to weave in some stories of people that I've worked with over the years. But I am delighted to have people here today because I think it's worth your time to just think about, well, is this my right time? And I do think, again, COVID was a time 5 years ago when a lot of people were worried about their jobs, losing their jobs. And I was doing a series of radio interviews and podcasts nationally talking about, is this the right time to start a business because of COVID? And I think in the year 2025, with more uncertainty about changes with layoffs, that people start to think about it again, like maybe this is my right time. So oftentimes there's a trigger event like what's happening in the economy or what happened with COVID a while ago, or people get a point in their career that they've hit a glass ceiling and they think, is this all I can do? Like, have I peaked already in my career and maybe I want to do something? Or there's a level of dissatisfaction in the jobs and they think, I want to be my own boss. I want to control my destiny. That's the right time for me right now. And then I think there are young people that just think, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try it because I've always been interested in an idea about starting a company. And so this may seem like the right time because they're going to just try it out, right, and see if it works for them. So I think there's a multitude of reasons why people start a business. I think this year in particular, and I've had a number of conversations with people in the last few months, that a changing economy oftentimes is one of the key triggers for people to think about starting a business.
I think many of the attendees today, including myself, have thought about getting into entrepreneurship, starting your own business. There's a lot of appeal there, I think, and being your own boss and kind of control of your own destiny. However, I think many of us have heard some myths about entrepreneurship that we might not realize, are they true or not? And what are some thoughts about some things that we may have heard about entrepreneurship?
Well, first off, I think people have a perception that it happens overnight and you're an overnight success, and they don't know the backstory of how long actually someone's been thinking about and considering starting a business. So I often think of Sarah Blakely as an example of the woman that started Spanx several years ago. She's one of the, she's a billionaire, someone that we have heard of. And she tells her story of having an idea to, and I don't know if we'd call it a nylon, but something for kind of a tummy tuck for women, if you will. And she had this vision of what she saw as the market. And she actually flew to Texas to actually meet with a retailer and had that person try it on. And that was the beginning of her very, very successful company, the launch of Spanx. And of course, that's expanded to others. But when you think of well-known Amazon, Jeff Bezos, right? And Mark Cuban, like all these people started with an idea and something was the impetus. So I was talking to you earlier, Matt. I remember on a podcast I did a few years ago and having this really interesting conversation with this woman. It was a tug of war back and forth because she was saying, oh, it's the back of a napkin. I'm like, I do not believe in the back of a napkin. I mean, I think that sounds great. You're having a beer and you're talking about an idea, but I think the reality is you got to do the work. And we're going to talk through the business plan concept, how important it is to write out a business plan, to vet your idea, to do your market research, to be as best prepared you can be for success. Because if you don't do that pre-work, the higher likelihood is that your business won't make it. And so my recommendation is always, always to be as best prepared as you can and to spend the time to do it right. And I'll talk in a few minutes too about the trap of perfectionism, which I've seen over the years too, that sometimes people get in their own way because they feel like it's got to be so perfect before they launch. The other thing I've witnessed through the years too is the imposter syndrome, where people think, well, who would ever buy from me? Whether it's buying my product, coming to my retail store, coming to my restaurant, or if I'm a professional services person, a consultant or trainer, wow, who's going to pay me to come and do work for them? And kind of getting past that, like own self-imposed barrier of why you might hold yourself back. I mean, what I often tell people is you have to be bold, you have to be thoughtful, but you also have to be bold, and you have to develop some really thick skin because you're going to get rejected a lot, and things won't go according to your plan. And these are the kind of barriers that sometimes people put in front of themselves. But just circling back to that original question, the miss, I think that it happens overnight, that people are financially successful right away. Often they're not. Um, Also, I want people to be prepared that there is going to be some kind of a financial investment in order to do well. So it'd be very rare that you could just start a business without putting some kind of money into it. So I think it's really important to think about, what am I prepared to invest? And do I have a bank account that supports that? And you want to be as best prepared you can to make sure that you're going to be successful in the long term.
Okay, so it sounds like a strong sense of self-awareness is important to what, your natural skills and abilities are and what you're interested maybe in developing and your work style, that type of thing. It's
Mhm.
good to note. But it raises an interesting question. Many people think that you're born an entrepreneur or you're
Mhm.
not, or you have to come from a family of entrepreneurs to be successful. What's your perspective on that?
No, I don't think that you do. I think of people that I know. Oftentimes, they've witnessed it in their own family or growing up, right, with family of entrepreneurs. But I would say more often than not, it's an observation of something that they think that they could do better, or it's that glass ceiling that I mentioned a little bit ago, that people just feel like they're stuck in their jobs and they want to start something. And my recommendation in general is for people to start something on the side to unless you've got plenty of money in the bank, which people do. So I definitely know there's a number of people that have the financial resources to be able to just go for it full bore. But I would say the average entrepreneur is kind of testing the waters, vetting out their business idea, and starting to do it kind of small on the side. And then like, okay, I've got some momentum. People are going to pay me for my product or my service. I've got something to grow and build with. And don't hold yourself back if you think, well, I don't know much about entrepreneurship, because you can study entrepreneurship, you can read about it, you can attend a bunch of webinars. There's a lot of resources available for people to learn more about entrepreneurship. That's what I did. I was always intrigued. I worked in the airline industry for 19 years. I was always intrigued about how you take a concept and build a company, right? And that because I didn't know I was a corporate person. I had no idea actually how to do it. So I was living in Seattle at the time. I moved back to the Twin Cities, and that's when I just immersed myself in entrepreneurship. And I worked with an organization called SCORE, and I was mentored as a SCORE client. And then I became a mentor to people that were starting businesses. And then I started doing training. And SCORE is part of the Small Business Administration. And I worked with Women Venture here in the Twin Cities. So I found resources that were going to help me be prepared, how to write a business plan, the things that I needed to do, I think to really have more success. And when I launched my company, because I did the hard work.
Well, this is such helpful information to learn a little bit more about what people need to think about with entrepreneurship. And I understand that today we'll be able to receive some resources. We're going to go through some resources for people to use on their potential entrepreneurial journey. And one of those is a readiness assessment, I believe. And what will our attendees today get by taking the readiness assessment, which I believe we're going to be sharing in the chat here soon?
Great, thank you. So Malin is putting it up right now. So the readiness assessment is something that I developed a few years ago, and then I've got iterations of it. So when I think of my entrepreneurial journey, I think like I didn't know a lot of people in my family or friends that were entrepreneurs. And so I was really navigating this on my own and trial and error, kind of learning. And I started a sales training company. So that was my first business. And I thought I was a sales leader in the airline industry and have worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and I've led sales teams. I can go out and I can do a sales training company. And that was my first foray into being a small business owner. And I was so ill prepared for what it was going to be like to be successful. And that's when I talk about immersing myself in resources and learning about it. But what I did when I built this readiness assessment, because there wasn't anything like it from my perspective, that I was able to kind of step back and evaluate my readiness. And so I built this assessment, and that we've just put up in the chat right now. And that really is to help you kind of, and I'm going to encourage people to download it. You don't have to work on it right now, but sometime in the next few days, while it's kind of fresh because you've joined us today, to actually go through the readiness assessment and answer some questions about how long have you been thinking about it? What is your financial readiness? What is your support network like? One of the things that I realized, Matt, and I told you this a bit ago, one of the things that surprised me the most was feeling lonely by working from my house when I used to go into an office. That was a big shock for me about what it was like to think about holding myself accountable all the time. And I talk a lot to people about accountability. Like that's one of the things that you need to be able to measure. And you want to be able to measure that right away. You got to set goals. I always encourage people to think about 30, 60, 90-day goals, 6 months, a year goal. So what do you want to accomplish? Because if you're doing it by yourself and you have a lunch meeting with a friend or something distracts you, or you need to go to a webinar and you kind of throw your week off, and you're not accomplishing what you need to accomplish in a job, you know exactly what you need to do, right? You've got deadlines, you've got projects, you're accountable to the person that you work for or your colleagues. When you're doing it by yourself and you're a new entrepreneur, it's new, and people don't quite know about how do I be successful on my own, especially the first part of launching a business. So I liked this readiness assessment. I've taken it myself. I've taught it and used it in classes over the years. And I think it's a good barometer for people to kind of go through the different sections of it as well about, again, financial readiness, vetting your business idea. Have you done your market research? Do you know your competition? The support network is really important. I can't say enough. It doesn't have to be everybody that you know, but to have people that support you and want you to be successful, but also find those friends or family members or colleagues that will give you kind of straight answers, right? Because sometimes we get married to our business idea and we have blinders on about the reality of whether or not there's actually a market for it. So listen to people. If they give you advice, sage advice, and act on it. One of the things that I'll say to you too, and I talk a lot when I teach about the value of networking, people that can help you vet your idea, kind of talk through, yes, there's a market for it. This is what people are willing to pay for it. But there is a point in your journey that you need to quit networking to, and you need just to start. And what I've seen happen oftentimes, it's this trap of perfectionism. Like if I'm not 100% ready to go, I'm not going to open the door, hang my sign out, or try to sell my services to a business. I would tell anyone in professional services to be about 65, 70% done and to get out there and to market yourself and meet with people and make sure that what you think is a really tangible business idea, indeed, people will pay for it. Because what you're going to learn from meetings is like, I thought this was an opportunity and it wasn't. I'm going to pivot and I'm going to do something different. And that's the value of networking. But more often than not, I've seen people over network. And my advice is do the networking, 4, 5, 6 months. But there is a point where you need to launch and stop kind of putting barriers, which I think happens more often than people, even accidentally, think that, hey, I got to talk to this person. I got to wait even further. And you don't. You just need to get started and then learn from the marketplace if you're onto something or not.
This it sounds like this readiness assessment is a great counter to the argument about, that you mentioned earlier, the back of the napkin, where it seems to me, some of those initial ideas, perhaps written down on the back of a napkin, are great to get the energy and the excitement going, but without a tool like a readiness assessment to help you dot all the I's, cross your T's, do your due diligence. It's hard to see how to translate that energy and excitement into something that's really going to be sustainable and have a solid foundation.
Totally
That's
agree.
very,
Thank you. And I think that's a good summary of the value of doing the work. So the assessment, obviously the market research and the like. I'll tell you a quick story. I taught a cohort a couple of years ago of a group of women. And one of the women was planning to sell her professional services, consulting services for $500 an hour. And which is great. She had an incredible, impressive background. And I think I knew her about 4 or 5 months, and I saw her at an event, and I said, I never knew that you were an attorney. And she said, what? I said, in all the times that we've been working together, because you've talked about this great corporate experience, you've never talked about the fact that you're an attorney. So when I can connect the dots between $500 an hour, great corporate experience, and by the way, you've got a law degree from Drake, that to me makes that sense, right? Of why I would pay you $500 to do consulting for my company. And that kind of rationale. And it just struck me. She's like, I can't believe I never mentioned it. I'm like, think about that, how important that is when you're leveraging. So I say to people in professional services in particular, that think about your 3 E's: your experience, your education, and your expertise, and how you package all of that and how you sell yourself. Because oftentimes when I've worked particularly with women in professional services, they've got this great background, great work experience. They've worked with high profile companies, but now they're out selling themselves and they have to package themselves, and they're going to lean on the work experience that they had at a previous job. I worked with a young woman about 5 years ago, and she'd done a lot of work with Salesforce as a consultant. And what I was trying to implore on her and the importance, like that will open doors for you because people know. Now, you're not in your own company right now working for Salesforce, but you've got that experience of working for Salesforce. So the assessment that I've provided here and the work that you get to do, you have to think about, what am I bringing, whether it's to a service or to a company, and excuse me, or to a product. Like why would somebody want to buy from me, work with me, buy my products? What difference am I going to make in their lives? And sometimes, by the way, people are foodies and they want to start, a food cart, or they're artists or whatever they might do, right? That they have passion for. I love that. So there's not always a correlation between work experience and starting a new business, but more often than not, there is some kind of correlation.
okay. So once someone has done their readiness assessment and they feel like they, have their ducks in a row in
Mhm.
some to some degree, I've heard that it's important also to have something a little bit more substantial, something like maybe like a business plan, and I
Yep.
believe that that is also something that we're going to talk about today and potentially share. Is that right?
You're right. And we can even segue into that right now too, Matt, about the importance of a business plan. I cannot say enough how about I push and push on the idea of having a business plan because of the work that will go into it. So here's the key. You are going to start a business and you want to make sure that you're very clear and you can communicate your value proposition, especially if it's a professional services. But let's just say you want to open a flower shop or a restaurant. Understand, why would people want to buy your product or service, or why would people, thank you, Madeline is actually putting up the template of a business plan. So there are elements to a business plan, I think, that are really important. It starts off with clearly describing your product or your service. And also think, do people understand it? I say practice your value proposition. So if you're meeting someone, let's say you're at the airport and you're having a conversation with someone, you're in the waiting area sitting on a flight, and you're talking about your business idea. I can't tell you how many times, and I do this when I start a class, when people introduce themselves and their product or service. And if you can't articulate in a few sentences what it is about your business, then if people don't understand and have to ask you more and more questions, then that means you've got to find a way to refine your message, right? About what your business plan is about, what your product or your service is. So when you think of a business plan, it's going to be clearly, and starting off with defining your product or your service, thinking about, who are my customers, right? What's the demographic? What's the profile information that I think is important to know about my potential customer? So male, female, age range, demographics of where they live, parts of the country. Why would they want to buy from you? So being really clear about your customer profile, because otherwise, you're throwing spaghetti on the wall and you're trying to do all things to all people, and that's not going to get you the progress that you need. So if you can be much more targeted out of the gate, and then think about your sales strategy. What's your sales strategy going to be about? Who are you going to reach out to? How are you going to market? And I would say most of us would think you're going to market online. That makes sense. You need to have a website, right? You need to have a presence online. And people that are, especially I think a younger generation, that's very, very comfortable with TikTok and Instagram. For some, that's where their audience is. So being able to strategize about that and execute off of that, that's going to help you be more successful. And then often I'll talk about the importance of a pricing strategy and being really mindful of what will people pay for your product or your service. One of the things that I tell people, especially in professional services, when they're trying to sell a contract, right, a training contract or consulting contract, is it's natural to try to like lower your price. And here's what I want people to think about is, if you lower your price, how do you get your price up? I'd rather have people think high up here and then have to negotiate down than to start low and like, oh, shoot, they didn't even blink. They paid for it. I could have charged another $50 an hour or X thousands of dollars more. So I think that's really important to be mindful of your price. There's also the natural family and friends discount, being mindful of that up front too. Like, how do you back out of that when you're successful and you're so busy that you can't afford to discount your rates? So that pricing strategy, I think, is really important. And then what's your network? Who in your professional network can help you, with contacts or give you advice and just help you along the way in your professional journey? So there's a whole lot to think about. So if you think about the assessment, the readiness assessment, the questions that you're going to answer about that, and then you think about a business plan and the work and the organization behind that, I think combined that helps set people up for success.
That's really helpful information. So when you're working on the business plan, should someone think of that as, okay, it's done. It's a finished document. It's my guide moving forward, and I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to modify it. Or is it something that they should be willing to adjust based on, the evolving market conditions? Or what are your thoughts about that?
That is such a great question, Matt. And I think people think, oh, I'm done. Now I move on to the next part of, starting my business. I would encourage, even on a monthly basis, for people to pull out their business plan and look at it, right? Because in the last 3 or 4 weeks, you've probably learned things about potential opportunities or potential customers. You also want to, by the way, build a target list. I talked about your customer profile. You need to have a target list of, companies or individuals that you're going to sell to. So it should not be a one and done. It should be fluid. You should be looking at it regularly, and then you should be able to adapt and adjust once you see kind of what the market is telling you about, yes, you're on track with something, or, you need to pivot. So great question. I did a television interview in Philadelphia during COVID. And this was one of the questions that I was asked about the important, like, oh, is it done? I'm like, it's not on the shelf. It is a working document. There are a number of templates that are available out there. Score.org, which is part of the Small Business Administration. The Small Business Administration also is a great source of information for templates and things to work on. But find tools that work for you. I still, probably because of my age, I like to write things down in notebooks. A lot of people are online, and that's probably the easiest thing to do because you can just correct and adjust. But find what works for you and just track it and look at it and then adapt as necessary.
From what you're saying, it sounds to me like another attribute of a successful entrepreneur is someone who's able to, like you say, pivot or adjust or know what's going on in the industry or in the community or in the country, in the market. The tariffs that we hear about so much right now and on the news, and how does a successful entrepreneur respond to that? And then do you need to change your plan and adjust and don't keep it on the shelf, as you say,
Right.
ready to rework things and adjust as necessary to make sure that you're staying competitive. That's good things to keep in mind.
Well, and think about that
Now,
too right now, Matt, with tariffs, how that's affecting small products, small businesses, right? And Amazon yesterday came
yes.
out and said that they were going to show on the site, I think he's reneged on that, but that he was going to actually show the impact of tariffs on the cost of products. And any interview I've seen on the news right now of a small business owner, doesn't even have to be a small business owner, it could be Amazon, it could be Apple, the impact of tariffs, like talk about having to adjust and adapt and circumstances out of anybody's control, but something that's critical for their long-term success.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a business owner's type of decision, right? Do I absorb that extra cost of the tariff or pass it on to the consumer? And so part of the challenge of running a successful enterprise. Now, and I understand there's a third very important document we're going to talk about today, the startup checklist. And if Madeline's able to share that, and Mary, if you could talk us through what we can learn from this document.
Yes, thanks, Matt. So this is something, there are a variety of checklists out there. This is something that I developed as well. And this is not complete in its entity. There are other things to consider, but I wanted people to have something that gets them kind of started about what are the things that they need to address, especially their first 30 to 60 days. So one of the fun things is determining the name of your business and why that's important up front, that if you wanted to name your company, you want to make sure that the domain is actually available. I also tell people don't spend hours or days thinking about it. Like find a name, kind of land on it, make sure it resonates, do a little checking around. But then the important thing is to follow up to make sure that the domain name is still available. You want to make sure that you register your business with your state government. Um, Determining the legal structure, I think, is really important too. So do I want to be a sole proprietor and am I LLC? I'm not going to go into detail about that. Probably not as important at this stage, but just kind of thinking through the legal part of it. You're going to get a tax identification number. You want to think about opening a corporate bank account that is separate for your business, right? You don't want to blend it into your personal bank account. A lot of time people just put it together. I'm like, don't do that. Best thing you can do is to really separate both your expenses as well as your revenue that comes in. And then thinking through your marketing, like, okay, where do I want to go to get a website? Could be GoDaddy. There's a whole bunch of small business consultants that could probably do a website for you at a really good, reasonable price. Getting an email that matches your corporate name. That's why you want to know kind of more upfront about what the name of your business is. Social media accounts for your business, thinking through that. Stationary business cards are kind of old fashioned, but it still works. People do want to have that. And then I always encourage people to think about who in the beginning do they need to work with? So what professional is going to help you just to keep you clean and on the right path, right? And that could be an attorney, and it could be a banker. It could also be an accountant, depending on the kind of business that you do too. So a CPA or a bookkeeper or an accountant, someone that can help you kind of manage your business. And there's a whole lot of professionals that work in the small business market. And those are the kind of people that you want to align with and kind of have in your back pocket as part of your team, right? That you're going to do work. If your business grows to the point that you need to expand that, you will. I would also advise people to think about how much time do I have to try to figure this out on my own? And is it worth the investment of hiring a consultant that could, like, I personally would think, oh, I could do a DIY website. Well, I don't really have the skills for that. And I could spend weeks doing something that I could pay someone a couple $1,000s and have them do my website. So if you look at that balance of time and investment, that's when we maybe want to think about, do I have a professional that can actually do the work for me? So the other thing that I'll just say too is build a budget. So think through, what are my costs? What are my expenses going to be? What's my revenue goal? And here's the other part of, especially if you're doing this full time, you are now paying your salary. You're going to have to pay taxes. So you want to make sure that you're clear about paying quarterly taxes. You're going to be funding your own 401k, and you're also probably going to have your own insurance, right? Health insurance and maybe business insurance. So there is a greater cost than what people actually think about in the kind of upfront stage of what it means to start a business. So I would just recommend to people that you think about, what are those costs, be prepared, have money in the bank. Again, launching quickly overnight usually doesn't happen. So just being prepared financially and emotionally for the roller coaster of it. You're going to have great weeks and months, and you're going to have others that you think, why did I do this? I had the security of a company. I had a 401k match. I mean, like all these good things of being an employee. And trust me, everybody feels it at points in this entrepreneurial journey that, oh boy, did I do the right thing? And you just got to kind of work through it, because you probably did the right thing or you wouldn't be that far along in your business. So it's kind of that reality check of the work involved, the whole emotional part of what's important. It isn't for everyone. I would say that up front. Sometimes you realize, like, I tiptoed into it, I did the work, and then it's not for me. And there's nothing wrong if you decide that being an entrepreneur today is not the right journey for you to be on. Just being mindful that, and here's, I guess, probably my parting thing is just to give yourself grace. If it doesn't work out and you decide to go back to being an employee, nothing wrong with that. Excuse me, with that. Or for those days that are really difficult, giving yourself grace, I think, is really important.
Mary, this is such helpful information for us to think through. And if you want to go down the entrepreneurial road or not, or trying to figure out the timing of that, it's something that that you want to pursue or not. Well, that brings us up to about the 12:30 time. And do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with everyone, or would you like to just to say a little bit more about how everyone will be receiving the other materials that we shared today?
So, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have a PowerPoint deck. It's a 21 slide. We'll send that out. We will also send out, once the video and audio is available, we'll send the link out if you'd like to view it. Feel free to, as well as the 3 attachments that we put in the chat. I think my parting words, Matt, and then I'll open up if people have any questions or comments, is just being mindful of the trap of perfectionism. I don't know very many people that don't have it, especially when they're starting their business. Be realistic that it's going to take longer than you think it's probably going to take. It's probably going to cost you more money than you think it's going to take. But the joy and the satisfaction of trying this, not everybody's going to, make it through. I've probably never felt as much satisfaction as when I did my own thing. It was really rewarding for me. And I think there is nothing wrong with starting on the side and figuring out if that's a good fit for you. And if it grows and you have momentum, let it take off. And then you decide, do I want to do this part-time and work, or do I just want to go for it full time? And so you'll know best. Your financial situation, your tolerance for risk, I think, is really important, because there is risk involved. There's no doubt about it. And if someone has lost their job right now and is actually probably got some unemployment benefits, probably a little money in the bank, I think I would navigate this. And if it's something that's of interest to you, I would do it now, while you're trying to figure out what you want to do next, right? Do I want to start a business full time, or do I want to start part-time and figure it out? But the best word I would describe at the end of the day is just give yourself grace, because it's a journey. That's the best way I would describe it. Genuinely is a journey, but it can be a very rewarding journey. So with that, Matt, we are going to be doing some in-person classes here on our Minneapolis campus coming up. We are actually going to be doing starting a business class. We've got people's emails that have signed up for the series, so we will send that information out to people as well. If they're interested in joining us, there is a cost for that. But we're doing one around starting a business, fundraising for nonprofits, financial acumen for people in non-finance roles, and then fundamentals of project management. So that's what we have. We will send out information. I just wanted to open the last couple minutes if there's any questions or comments from people.
Thank you so much, Mary. Yes, please, attendees, if there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll go through. I know I'm looking forward to these courses, classes that will be coming up on the Minneapolis campus. A lot of good information will be shared and opportunities for networking too, I understand, to meet other people, like-minded people, or thinking about perhaps starting a business, or it's always good to meet new professionals in the Twin Cities area to grow your network.
I totally agree, Matt.
We may not have any questions right now. Any final comments, Mary, before we?
No, again, thanks. Thank you for moderating, and I appreciate the people that came today. Well, thanks, Belinda. Good to have you here. Thank you for your time and your investing in just getting some more information and figuring out if this is something that you're interested in.
Here is a final question.
Oh, yeah.
How would you suggest going about research rates for about researching rates to charge for your services? Yeah. Any resources that you might suggest, Mary?
Dylan, that's a great question. So oftentimes it's not real transparent on somebody's website. So if would you mind just giving me a little more detail? Like if you're going to do consulting services, if you can, try to do your best to see what's available. If it's transparent, it's not always, but sometimes it is transparent on sites. Especially a consultant, they don't usually put it out there as openly as others might. I would say you could try to benchmark. Oh, hold on. Thank you, Farquima. I'll come back to your question. I would try to benchmark. So let's just say you're doing marketing consulting services. What do you think is a fair rate? And I want you to take into account, all right, I'm paying my salary, I'm paying my taxes, I have expenses. Consulting is a project management. Okay, great. So Dylan, I think there's a whole world out there for you to do that kind of project management. And in fact, if you want to send me an email, I will connect you also with Bill Johnson, who's the program director, who might be your program director too, if you're in project management, and talk about that. But sometimes in the beginning, you're estimating to get a read. So here's my recommendation. If you're probably in the $100 to $150 range, that's probably a fair price. Here's what you want to understand. If you're too cheap, if you come out too low, people are going to second guess the caliber and the quality of the consulting that you're going to get from you. So you have to try to be as mindful as you can. What I would try to do is ask the question, what's your budget? So if you're going to be doing a consulting project and it's 50 hours, and you can try to get them to say to you, I've got $10,000, that gives you a barometer to kind of gauge how you're going to price. What you want to think about too, are you pricing by the hour? Or are you going to price by the project? Okay. What will often happen when it comes to professional services is that there's scope creep, that you end up doing more than you originally thought you were going to do. So thinking about how am I going to charge it? I just say that up front because it's happened a lot when I work with entrepreneurs like, oh, shoot, now I'm doing more work, but I feel awkward asking for another $2,000. If you're doing that work, make sure that you're charging for it. So in the beginning, Dylan, I think it's trying to get a read as best you can, ask those professional and appropriate questions from your potential client. If you can do some networking and understand what you hear rates are in your arena of specialization and expertise, I think that'll help you build up. But I would just say anything below 100 an hour for professional services, when you start to net out taxes and 401, you're building your own retirement contribution. You just want to be mindful that you're not underpricing your services, so that sets the standard too. And so when you want to go up in pricing, you're going to have a difficult time telling your client like, well, now I'm this because you came in so low. I often tell people too, I totally get oh, it's like uncomfortable trying to get to that right rate. So it is a navigation, and you'll just have to try to figure out what you think the market will bear, but by asking good questions and doing some networking. And if there's any way to find transparency, it's a little more challenging than we'd like it to be. So I hope that answered. Does that give you a little more perspective and direction? Good. Oh,
All
good.
right,
You know
sounds
about
good.
that too. Okay, then quickly, based on your experience, what are the top three reasons businesses fail and how can one avoid them? I think it's failure to plan, and that's why I've been emphasizing the importance of a business plan. I think it's also underpricing and undervaluing your product or your service. And so you really want to do a competitive scan and understand the value of what you offer. Um, and I think people get in their own way sometimes, like they wait to be so far along. When I talked about that trap of perfectionism, like they're so far along, um, and then they've invested a lot of time and money, and then what they think the market wants is not actually a market. And then sometimes they turn back because they can't afford to continue because they've invested too much time with, and that's my recommendation, like the 70% being ready, because you want to be professional, you want to look, sound, have the professional look. But I can't tell you how many times people think this is what people want to buy, this is what they're going to pay me for, and then they find out like, uh-oh, not willing to do that. But if you could do this kind of training, that's something that I'm interested in. And that's why I really say network to a point that it's critical that you get it, but then don't over network and get out there and sell. That's the most important thing. And I think that holds people up probably more than anything is that they don't like to sell themselves. I can tell you that Matt would probably rather sell me and I would rather sell Matt than selling each other, right? It's just more natural. People have a hard time selling their own value proposition. So you've got to get more comfortable with number one, having a sales strategy and identifying your target, like who are your target clients or your customers. But then you've got to get really comfortable in selling, and you've got to practice about how kind of what your sales pitch is, your value proposition to a customer. I'll just make this real quick. I used to tell people in my sales classes, I would categorize a potential client as an A, B, or C account. And I would try to meet with C accounts to do my sales pitch and to learn from them. And then you could see something really resonated or something didn't. Move up to your B accounts. Your A accounts are really the people. This is in professional services in particular. Those are the ones that you want to do work with. You don't want to try and fail with your top prospects. You want to try to learn and fail from your lower level prospects. That would be the value of categorizing, like who are my key customers, what category do I put them in, and then how can I be more successful by learning from here and pivoting. By the time I get to the key people that I want to work with, hopefully you'll have good insights about what's working, what's not working.
I really like the idea of categorizing your potential clients in different ways to help you kind of adjust your strategy accordingly.
You do. And the other quick piece at the end, it's thinking through, you have to have a pretty significant list of people that you're going to prospect because let's just say you have 50 prospects. You're probably not going to be able to touch 60 people, or excuse me, 50 people. So having a wider net and then being realistic about an initial meeting, a second meeting, and so on and so on. So that it's kind of a numbers game too. You need more people in your database, your prospects, so that you can try to sell to. But at the end of the day, you might end up talking to 4 people that might really truly buy your service. And so being mindful about what's kind of that game, if you will, of how many people do I really need to talk to get to my revenue goal so that I'm prepared. We haven't spent a lot of time on this. I know our goal was just to do the fundamentals. And I personally, my niche when I teach entrepreneurship is talking about sales and sales strategies, because if you can't sell, it's hard to be a sustainable business, unfortunately. So at another time, if there's an interest, I'm happy to talk about sales and sales strategies for small businesses.
Well, wonderful. A solid start to the conversation today. And for more conversation, please join us, on the Minneapolis campus. It's coming up sometime soon, I believe in June, for more discussion on starting your own business and entrepreneurial journeys. Thank
Thank you,
you
everyone.
so much for everyone for joining us today. And we wish you well and success in all your ventures.
Thanks, everyone. Farquima, we'll send out my email if you want to follow up in an email with me too, okay? Thanks, everyone.